Hi, welcome to the second part of my personal testimony about how I became a Christian. In the previous video, part one, if you've not seen that, have a look at it because this follows on from that. I shared about the experiences I had and how I felt God calling me to himself. The thing that finally did it for me, the straw that broke the camel's back, was one rainy winter night, 1979 over into early 1980. I don't know the specific date. I was walking back from the pub Friday or Saturday night, a weekend night. It's cold, I had a big lovely overcoat on, and as I was walking home from this pub, which was about 15 minutes walk from the bedsitter where I'd moved into, I was walking home, raining, dark, about 11:30 at night, and as I was walking home on this busy road, I was walking past a large Roman Catholic church on my left as I was walking up this hill on the Dudley Road, anyone from Birmingham, inner city, Edgbaston. And outside of this Roman Catholic church, just in between me on the footpath and the church doors, just at the side, was a big life-size wooden crucifix, like lifted up, you know, one of these big ones. And I just stopped in front of it and just was looking up at it and pondering, literally asking in my heart, what is this all about? You know, remember, I'd had, within the previous 18 months, I'd had, you know, two very quite dramatic things that had really got me thinking. Plus I'd also bought a Bible and I'd started reading John's Gospel, and God had really spoken to me, and I knew it somehow through particularly John chapter 6 and verse 37, which says, whoever comes to me I will never drive away. So that idea of acceptance, I knew, along with the experiences, which were good experiences, very positive, I knew that, you know, this person, thing, these experiences, that it was good. Plus my, about 3 years earlier, looking up at the stars, which I share on part one of this video, and this panoply of stars, and God just really spoke to me of this bigness and beauty and greatness. So I knew God was good. So as I was looking up at this cross, I was just asking him in my heart, what is this all about? You know, what are these kind of experiences? And as I was looking at this crucifixion of this image of Christ on this cross, God opened my eyes, spiritual eyes, and for 4 or 5 seconds, it was as though I was transported back and I was actually there at the crucifixion in person. And I saw, as my eyes were opened for that brief but significant time, that he died for me. And it went right into me. And I knew, without any doubt whatsoever, that he'd done that thing on the cross for me. At the time, you know, I thought, wow, boy. And I knew this was the, you know, a revelation. I knew this was God really speaking into me, my heart. I carried on my way home. As soon as I got home, I picked up a little gospel leaflet, one of these little leaflets that evangelists give out, which I'd got a few weeks earlier in Birmingham city centre off one of these book stands. And as soon as I got in, I got that, I looked at it, and the prayer on the back, I got down on my knees and I prayed that prayer. And obviously I really meant it, because God had just really spoken to me. And I prayed it again over the next few nights as well. Around that time, whether it was the next day or the day after the next, I don't specifically remember, but I do remember at that time, that's when the heaviness or the whatever it was left me, and it was though I was kind of floating on air. The next day or the day after the next at work, I was just constantly thinking about the Lord Jesus. I had this lightness, this joy in my heart. It was the sky, the whole of everything around me was new, was different. It was like, the way I described it was like in Birmingham at that time in the 70s. There were lots of underpasses, and my experience of coming to Christ, it was like going from one dismal, miserable place down an underpass and coming up on the other side in a completely new world, bright, light, joyful. I was at work. I worked in this car factory, big car factory, and I was very introverted. I had a stutter, speech impediment, and I wouldn't say boo to a goose. I just kept myself to myself. But I found myself over the next days talking to people that I would never usually talk to, because I was just so completely set free. I was talking to shop stewards, and it was as though overnight my personality had changed. It was incredible. I felt like, I said, I felt like I was floating. You know, I felt so light inside of me, so full of joy. It was incredible. And of course I knew, and because I was constantly thinking about Jesus, I knew that this was something really dramatic. The next Sunday, maybe a week later, I thought I need to go back to this church, this Roman Catholic church, and see if I can find someone else that this has happened to, or can't stop thinking about Jesus the way I am. So I did. I went to a Sunday morning service at that Roman Catholic church, but just felt nothing, you know, just felt dead, no kind of connection, you know. So I thought, right, I'll go to this other church building the week after, which I did. This was a local church building, which I found out later was a Church of England church, which was just about 100 metres down from where I lived in my bedsit. And there, after the meeting, I got chatting, or someone approached me. He was the curate, the Anglican curate, and his name was Hugh Symes Thompson. So if you're watching this, Hugh, thank you. Right. The curate, he came up and started talking to me, and he had a twinkle in his eye, and I knew instantly that he had the same thing that I had. And as we chatted, he soon discovered that I was, you know, just found Jesus, as it were. So I started to go to that church, and particularly the Wednesday evening Bible study prayer meeting. And that's when the kind of floods kind of came, really. Not floods of tears, but just the joy, and I was praying. And one of the interesting things as well, right from that earliest point, was that whenever I prayed, I didn't have any disfluency. There was no speech impediment, there was no stuttering or anything. But in normal conversation, I had this stutter still. So I started to get involved in that church, and there were the vicar, John Knight, great guy. He was born again, and there was a real core of people in that church that were real Christians, you know, had the Spirit of God on the inside of them. So I got involved in the children's work. When I started going, I can remember one of the first, you know, Wednesday nights I went to that church. As soon as we came out, about 9:30, after the Bible study and that, I'd light up a fag, and I was smoking outside the vicarage where the meetings were. And I can remember a few funny looks and that. So I was still smoking cigarettes. I've been smoking for about 4 years. I'd been trying to stop smoking, but couldn't. But within 2 or 3 months, the desire for nicotine, for cigarettes, just went. Then one of the most wonderful things happened, amazing things happened. Probably 6 months or so after my conversion experience, that when I was born again, or second birth, born again into God's family, we had a visiting evangelist come to the church, and it was bonfire night, and he was holding a little evangelistic thing in the local park. There was a big public bonfire, so there were thousands of people there, and he came and was connected with our church, the vicar John. He was very much into evangelism. He'd probably invited him, and you know, some of us from the church, including me, went with John the vicar, with this evangelist, and joined in with this evangelism. His format was that he had this kind of minibus, little van, and at the back it opened up and he showed short 5-minute gospel cartoons, and that attracted a little crowd. And then in between the cartoons he would have a mic and he'd preach the gospel to them. So we did this, and during one of the little intervals between the cartoons, John, the pastor, vicar, he asked me if I'd share a testimony. Now, why he asked me, I don't know, because I could hardly speak, you know. But he did. He asked me to give a testimony. So I stepped forward, got the mic. There were 4 or 5 people and 1 or 2 families there. But as I started to speak, I was obviously stuttering a bit, trying to introduce myself. But then, as it happened, you know, previously, the Spirit of God came upon me, and I just started preaching or sharing what had happened to me, and it was as though I was on autopilot. I was kind of listening to myself speaking. That's how it felt. I remember thinking at the time, and I can still remember it, thinking, wow, this is, it was almost, I was like a passive observer of myself preaching. And as I was preaching, you know, other people came and there was a little kind of crowd around. And then, you know, maybe, I don't know how long I was preaching for, 2 or 3 minutes, maybe a bit longer, not a long time. But as soon as the Spirit came on me, he left, and I was just left kind of holding the mic, you know. One person in particular stayed after that meeting, a man named David Smith. So David, I think David passed on a few years ago, but that night David gave his life to Christ. So that, I share that because that was the start really of what I realised God had called me to do open air preaching. The following weeks I had this desire and was constantly thinking, you know, when I was walking around my normal life business, why isn't anyone sharing God on the streets, you know? Why isn't anyone telling people about Jesus? And I quickly realised through chatting with my vicar as well, I think, that was probably because God was calling me to do it. And obviously John had seen what had happened, you know, where God had imparted to me, or at least given some real indication that he'd call me to this. So he suggested, you know, 1 or 2 organisations. But as it happened, just a few weeks or within a month or 2 after that event on Bonfire Night, and this would be about 1980, late 1980 maybe, I was walking through Birmingham city centre and I saw some evangelists, some people preaching about Jesus in Chamberlain Square, what used to be Chamberlain Square. So in my naivety, I walked up to them and said, can I do that? Can I ever preach? And the guy, his name was Wesley, who was leading the group from Birmingham City Mission, he looked at me a bit suspiciously and said, yeah, sure, you know, at the end you can, at the end. So I believed him, went and sat down, listened for about an hour, expecting any minute to be called up to stand on this box and preach. When to my horror, they started packing away. I couldn't believe this, so I kind of went over and said, you know, you said that I could have a go, you know. I was completely naive. So reluctantly he said, okay, just have a step up and say a few things. So I stepped up onto the box and preached, you know, no disfluency, no stammering, nothing. You know, I felt perfectly at home, and even a joy, you know, I felt the energy flared. I just felt, and it was, I felt at home, you know. So after that, I got involved, and every Saturday I would go and join with Birmingham City Mission and preach and share the gospel. So that was, for me, that was a wonderful experience of not just being healed of a stutter, a speech impediment, which was fantastic, but also to sense what God had given me to do in terms of how I should serve him. So that was really within the first year after I became a Christian. And so I really thank God for his mercy in calling me to himself and giving me the grace to live for him and to serve him. So may God bless you in your service of him. Amen.